Hello, Duke fans, and welcome to episode 155 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. It is Sunday night, March 24th, 2019, and if this was the week, you picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue, because the Blue Devils, the Blue Devils just barely eked out Johnny Dawkins's University of Central Florida team tonight by a single point. My understanding is that it's the last time that Duke won an NCAA tournament game by 1 point was way back in 2008 when yours truly, Sam Klein, was a freshman at Duke. I'm now a fifth year. It just took me a long time to get here. So with that, we're going to recap that game. We're going to recap the whole weekend of the NCAA tournament to this point. But before we do that, of course, I need to bring in my co-hosts. I'm coming to you as usual from Durham. I also have, as usual, in Atlanta, Georgia, Jason Evans. Jason, good evening. How are you?
Without being too graphic, I'm still cleaning up my shorts after watching the end of that game.
So we have that. That graphic, and up in Washington D.C., he's probably the happiest one here because he just gets to stay in his home city next weekend and see the Blue Devils play. Is our man Donald Wine? Donald, can't wait to come up and hang out with you next week.
That's going to be fun. First of all, I want to note that when you said we haven't won a 1 point game in the NCAA tournament since 2008, that game was against Belmont. I was at that game. That game was right here in Washington, D.C. So a kind of a full circle at this point. But also, if any of you out there have 2 extra tickets for two of your favorite Duke Basketball Report podcast co-hosts, please email us at dbrpodcast@gmail.com. We will happily take them off your hands.
Yeah, that's true. Donald, I have a ticket for next week, but I will
see. You already left me, guys.
We can always use more. We can always use more. We will be eternally grateful to you. And speaking of people that we're grateful for, of course, before we get going with the show tonight, we have to, of course, thank our sponsors as usual. The folks at Bird Campbell law firm in Florida and Texas for all of your legal needs. Of course, contact them at birdcampbell.com, BYRDCAMPBELL.com. Bird Campbell means business. And of course, to Kenny Denard and his fine new website, gthcgth.com, for all of the latest Go to Hell Carolina and Duke men's basketball apparel. My understanding is that this week they've got new shirts up there that have the Sights on Six ads on them. So you guys can cop those over at gthcgth.com. So now that we've done that, guys, let's get right into it. As we, of course, mentioned at the top of the show, and is that as everyone who I would imagine is listening to this show is well aware, Duke, as I said, eked out a victory this evening against UCF. The final score in Columbia, South Carolina was 77-76. It was a back and forth affair. Duke was down by a few points late. Donald, I'm going to get your reaction first because I feel like Jason's really going to amplify things here, and I'm curious to see if he goes in on the refs or if he goes in on some of the coaching or some of the players. But Donald, let me start with you. Give me your take on Duke getting this very tough victory against Johnny Dawkins's team.
So there's a lot we can start with, but I'm going to start with this. Hats off to UCF. Straight up, they played exceptional tonight. And Aubrey Dawkins, I'm not quite sure how he ended up being the player of the game, but he was every bit the player of the game. Coach K called him magnificent, and I don't think that's a good enough word to describe his performance tonight. 32 points on 12 of 18 shooting, and it seemed like at a certain point in the second half, literally everything he threw up went in. It was a magnificent performance, and I would say that they were equally deserving to win this basketball game. Now, having said that, I think we also were deserving to win this basketball game, and I'm glad that we did, even if it was by a point. It's called Survive and Advance, ladies and gentlemen, in March Madness. And that is exactly what we did tonight. You start with Zion.
Donald, yeah. I've got a question. If you win the national title and you win a game where it was just barely really close and the ball rolled off the rim and, you could have easily lost, do they put like an asterisk on your national title or is it some way
sure
tainted?
Hang on, it depends. It depends. How many strippers did you pay for your players to hang out with during the season?
That's
I think that you have to know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, but they don't normally put an asterisk. But yes, there are exceptions to that rule. But getting back to our performance, I start with Zion, and it's funny. Zion, when you look at the game, it didn't seem like he had a very efficient game because before the game they were talking about the matchup between him and Taco Fall, and going at him was really what allowed him to score a lot of points. But it didn't seem to be efficient. But when you look at the box score, you see, he had 32 points and 12 of 24 shooting and was 3 for 7 from three-point land and had 11 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal. It just I don't understand how he is able to make something so what would appear so efficient or inefficient look so great in the box score, because I think he had a great game, but it was a struggle in the first part as they tried to figure out how to get around Taco and get points in the paint, which is where our specialty is. I want to say that RJ Barrett at the end of the game was very good, but I question what we were doing in that last minute, because I feel like we were out of sorts basically from about 2 minutes on or 2 minutes left in the game to the end of the game, and somehow we still came out with a 1-point victory. So I'm going to go with Jason here and get his thoughts, because there's a lot we can unpack. I'm just going to start with that and let Jason take it from there.
So I'm glad you talked a little bit about how Taco influenced the game. When I'm wrong, I say it. And I am here to tell everyone I was wrong about how much Taco Fall would impact the game. I greatly underrated. I guess I didn't realize how big 7'6" was, even though I made that great joke about it being as much taller as Sam is shorter, whatever the joke.
Yeah, I was going to say, you didn't know how tall it was. Come on now. I feel like we really beat this thing to death a few days ago.
I didn't realize how much Taco would impact everything we tried to do in the lane. To some extent, if you were to say, I'm going to design a team to shut down what Duke does best, the very first thing you would do is you would go, I'm going to get a guy who's 7'6" and put him in the middle of the lane, because RJ and Zion were incredibly affected going to the hoop. And everyone there was this big thing over the weekend that Taco said he wasn't going to let Zion dunk on him. And people were like, oh, Zion's going to dunk on you anyway. Guess what? Zion never dunked on Taco Fall. You guys want some incredible stats? ESPN put these stats out here, and I want to repeat them to you. Zion Williamson, on plays when Taco Fall was not in the game, was 4 of 4 in the paint. He was 5 of 6 overall, and he averaged 2.17 points per shot when Taco Fall was not in the game. That's right. He averaged better than 2 points per shot when Taco Fall was not in the game. When Taco was in the game, Zion was 7 for 18. This is a guy who hits 2/3 of his shots. He was just 7 for 18. You know what Zion's field goal percentage was in the paint? I mean, and this is a guy who hits probably 80% of his shots in the paint. He was 4 for 10 when Taco Fall was in there. Zion averaged less than 1 point per shot, 0.83 points per shot when Taco Fall was in the game.
Now, Jason, how many of those were Taco fouls that weren't called?
Oh my God. Okay, so wait. So
we got to go about that too.
We're going to do this now. So Taco Fall fouled out with 5 fouls, but actually he didn't foul out with 5 fouls. I think he had 5 fouls. I think he had 7 or 8 fouls. There was like one 11. Play. Oh my! How did the refs? How did these guys? By the way, with referees, the way it works in the NCAA tournament is they cut the number of same way they cut the number of teams in half each round. They cut the number of refs in half each round. So
does that mean that they like King Solomon the refs? Because I feel like they could do that to these guys and they would have been just as effective, right? I mean, can I finish your thought for you, Jason?
Go, man, please.
What an atrocious game by the referees. And you know how you know it's bad is that, like, I was watching the game and I really try to take my Duke goggles off when I'm thinking about like how crappy the refs are. And this was such a bad call. There were times when I thought like, Duke actually was on the receiving end of, like on the good end of some of these bad calls, but some of the no calls on the fouls were just nuts. And then I go onto Twitter and everyone is bashing the refs for being Duke homers, including Jeff Goodman, who actually like has to write about college basketball on a national level. I can't remember where he writes for now, but I saw his tweet show up in my timeline about how, of course, Duke was going to get all these calls, and I was like, "Oh, brother, here we go." What a stupid old trope.
Look at our group text. I just sent you a picture of the foul that was not called, that would have been taco fouls.
I've seen it.
It's the freeze frame. But here's the thing. I want to, and I'll get back to you, Jason. Talking about Taco and all his fouls, there was one play where he fouled RJ Barrett 3 times on the same play. And Ben Swain on Twitter at that point, because they show the replay, and Taco, of course, is 7'6". When he puts his hands in the air, he's basically 10 feet tall. But when he was hitting RJ Barrett, it was at the backboard, which is about 8.5 feet off the ground, right? So he had his hands basically straight out. So Ben Swain on Twitter goes, not sure why Taco's allowed to bring his arms down. That's a foul if he's 6'10" and the other guy is 6'4". And he's absolutely right, because that very next possession that UCF had, they go down the lane. Javin DeLaurier puts his hand like 1 degree past perpendicular, and he gets a foul call. And that's what had Coach Krzyzewski absolutely livid on the sidelines, especially after that play where he was like down there. He's literally, has his hand straight out and foul the guy 3 times, no call. You go down and our guy is 1 degree off center, and all of a sudden it's the most egregious foul in the world. That's why people were on Twitter talking about the refs on both sides.
Well, can I just say really quick? So we bash the refs here, and there's no question that Taco Foul, I've decided that's what I'm going to call him. There's no question that Taco Foul committed way.
You're very funny, Jason. You know that? Very funny.
Bite me.
Man, at least we won. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, there's no question that he committed way more fouls than he was called for. But let's put the refs aside for a minute. I really feel for Johnny Dawkins and Aubrey Dawkins. You could tell in the post-game interviews that both Coach K and Johnny hated playing each other, and that they were both incredibly conflicted. I mean, Johnny talked about it in his interview on CBS. He was like, I love these guys, not meaning his team, meaning the Duke coaches, the Duke staff, the Duke program. And he said, on the one hand, I'm incredibly sad that my team lost. On the other hand, I'm glad that Coach K won. And Aubrey Dawkins, Donald, you talked about it for a second. What a great game by that guy. Do you guys know Aubrey Dawkins is like 24. He has been around forever because he took a year of prep school when he got done with high school. And then he went to Michigan for 2 years, and then he transferred to play for his dad to Central Florida. To South Florida. Central Florida. I've done that so many times now.
Are we going to do this? Are we going to do this again?
We're not doing this again.
I think it's a great bit.
No, we're not doing it again. He transferred to Central Florida, so he had to sit out a year. Then he got hurt, and so he didn't play last year because he was hurt. So he graduated from high school in like 2013 or something like that. He's been around forever. But for him to have almost certainly the best game of his career playing against, this kid sat on Coach K's knee when he was a baby. And he has the best game of his career playing against Coach K, against his dad's school on a big national stage. I feel for them because Aubrey and Johnny they deserve to win today. I just wish it hadn't. I wish they'd been playing someone else so they could have won and we could have rooted for them.
Yeah, it was funny at halftime. Trace Wilson asked Coach K about Aubrey Dawkins and his performance, and he said, he has 15 points, and Johnny better thank me for all those times that I let him in the gym in Cameron to take all those jumpers, because it's certainly paying off. I thought that was pretty funny.
Well, you think about it, he's 24 years old. Johnny Dawkins left Duke 11 years ago, so Aubrey Dawkins would have been in Durham until age 13. Those would be like his most formative years, especially when it comes to like idolizing basketball players and all that kind of stuff.
And development purposes. Yeah, he was definitely, that's the thing you could tell Coach K is emotional about this whole game. When we talk about how he loves his players and he loves, his former assistants, I don't. It's hard to find someone that he loves more than Johnny Dawkins. He talks about him all the time. When Johnny Dawkins left in 2008, he mentioned how much he was a part of the program and how he had built it and how he really established it. And Johnny Dawkins was that recruit that got them over the hump. So I really, he clearly has a lot of respect for him and for that team. And you could tell how hard they played because those guys wanted to get a win for Johnny too. And it just, it sucked. Like you said, it sucks that we had to play each other because I think both teams deserve to be in the Sweet 16, but I'm glad it's us.
So as much as I would love to actually keep talking about the whole Johnny Dawkins thing, because I think the Coach K and his former players / assistants element of this was arguably the most fun, talking point of the game. But I did want to get down into like a little bit more analysis because I think it's going to be important, especially looking forward at all the different ways that UCF tried to attack Duke and kind of trying to think about what Duke is going to have to do to adjust here as we get into the tournament. We're now into the Sweet 16. There are not even mediocre teams left. There's only really good teams left ahead for Duke. So, Jason, why don't you kind of get in a little deeper about what Duke was able to do on offense and sort of how that game plan had to change to adjust to the different defenses that UCF was throwing at them?
So to me, the biggest thing is, and we knew this was going to happen. It's teams saying we're not going to let RJ and Zion beat us. And they essentially, there are a couple times it looked like they might have been playing a triangle and 2 or something like that. It's sort of weird because UCF, because Taco is so big, they don't have to put guys on the back line. Taco essentially is the entire back line, but it felt like they were determined not to let RJ and Zion beat them. Now, in the end, RJ and Zion did beat them because RJ and Zion are like inhumanly good. We don't need to get into that. Everyone knows how great those two guys are, who are going to be, 2 of the top 2 or 2 of the top 3 picks in the NBA draft, and who've set record after record after record for freshmen and having nothing to do with freshmen. But I think what happened to Trey Jones in this game, to me, is a major story for Duke. Trey was at one point 0 for 7 from 3. He ended up hitting his last one to go 1 for 8. And they were leaving Trey wide open. And I don't know if other teams will be able to duplicate this, because part of why they were leaving him open was if he tried to go inside, Taco's able to disrupt his shot. Taco Fall had, I think it was 3 blocks in the game, but the number of times he changed people's shots was unreal. It probably well into the double digits of shots that Duke missed because of the way Taco makes you change your shot. I'm concerned for what teams are going to try and do to Trey going forward, because I think teams have clearly identified that as a point of weakness for Duke. That said, Trey seemed very confident. I didn't feel like he was a reluctant 3-point shooter in this game. There were a couple times he stepped into them where it looked to me like this was a guy who was certain that his next shot was going to go down. That said, a friend of mine sent me an email, a note that I had to repeat that is just so damn funny. He said every time one of Duke's guards takes a 3-pointer before number 1, Zion Williamson, touches the ball, somewhere a kitten dies.
It's actually, it sounds kind of horrible, but your friend does have a point.
Yes.
The thing that was astounding to me about it, I had a lot of friends saying like, oh my God, what is Trey doing? Like, why does he keep taking these shots? They're obviously giving them to him. And you got to think that Coach K was on the sideline telling him, look, if you have the shot in rhythm and it's open for you, you might as well take it, because it doesn't seem like there's anything wrong with his shot. It doesn't seem like he doesn't know what he's doing. They just aren't falling. And you have to kind of play that way, even though it's sort of it's like the optimal strategy for Duke to let Trey Jones take the shots at least occasionally, if only to keep the defense honest. And he's going to keep taking them. And I'm curious to see next week and we'll talk about Virginia Tech. I'm curious if Virginia Tech is going to play as loose with the non-Zion and RJ members of the offense as UCF did.
Well, by the way, one of those non-RJ and Zion guys who I wanted to single out, Cam Reddish was 3 of 4 from 3-point range and hit, the biggest three of the season with 1 minute and 40 seconds left with Duke down 4. And absolutely, stepped into it, and there was no question in his mind that it was going down. And I loved, we got the really good Cam Reddish early in the game. Cam was great for about the first 10 minutes or so. And then he sort of, went into he got in foul trouble and things weren't going his way. And we know how it is kind of with Cam. I love him, and I think he's got a huge, huge future, but sometimes he disappears. And Cam disappeared for a long stretch. Again, a lot of it was foul trouble, but some of it was also his own doing. But for him to make that play really late in the game, I thought was really big. And then I also can I talk for a second about Javin DeLaurier? Because I thought Javin was outstanding at times in this game. I also think that Javin is the happiest man in the entire state of South Carolina tonight because we won, despite him missing 2 free throws with 1 minute left, down 1. I mean, oh my God, talk about a nightmare. And the second of those free throws never even came close to getting to the rim, or getting above the rim, I should say. But I thought Javin did a really nice job on Taco. He blocked one of Taco Fall's shots. I was like, damn. And he had
that's got to be a highlight. In general.
And he gave him a little Javin stare. It wasn't like a stare that would get him in any trouble or anything, but it was enough to be like, yeah, that happened.
He had another block that was really impressive.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Javin was excellent on defense. He had 8 rebounds. He had some hugely clutch offensive rebounds. So even though and he had a slam dunk, I mean, even though he missed those 2 free throws, and that may be what some people remember about him, I really felt like Javin did a great job in this game and is one of the unsung heroes of this contest, along with Jordan Goldwire. Guys, I got a question. What kind of odds could you have gotten on this statement a couple weeks ago? Duke's best lineup includes Jordan Goldwire, because I'm starting to think Duke's best lineup includes Jordan Goldwire because of his defensive pressure.
It has to at this point, because Duke turns to Jordan Goldwire when they need to make things happen. And honestly, it happens at both ends of the court. It's not like Jordan Goldwire is a great shooter or anything, but he's still a good facilitator. And then on defense,
he hit a 3. He hit another 3.
That's true. He and Trey Jones play that suffocating press defense as well as we've seen in college basketball, I think, in a number of years. I love talking about that 2013 Louisville team. That is what it reminds me of when you see Goldwire and Trey Jones like really locking in on the press. And down the stretch, UCF was really frustrated by it, especially with Goldwire in the game. There were times when they would just dribble themselves into a corner and then be totally stuck and have to call a timeout. I love watching Duke play that way, and I love that Goldwire is able to contribute in that way. As I said last week on the show, I don't know anymore what the deal is with Duke's rotation. It does seem to change. Jack White obviously was hurt this weekend, so we didn't get to see him, and we don't know how the rotation would have been different with him. But man, who knows? Jason, I think you're right. I think Jordan Goldwire is on Duke's best 5 at this point. I don't know if they're going to actually move him into the starting lineup. I don't know if that would be necessary.
No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not.
But
what
they're
I'm saying.
going to. But he's going to keep getting 20 minutes a game if that's the case, and Duke's just going to kind of keep him around. This is sort of like what they probably would have preferred Tyler Thornton be doing when Tyler Thornton was starting and playing 35 minutes a game. This is probably the role that was envisioned for him, back in the day.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to add is 2 really quick things about the very, very end of the game. First of all, I'm pretty sure you both are old. I know Donald is. Sam, I think you're old enough to remember the Indiana game in 2002, where at the very, very end of the game, Carlos Boozer comes down with a rebound. He gets horribly fouled. The refs don't call it, whatever. And his shot like rolls and bounces off the rim as time expires. And so Duke loses the game in the tournament to Indiana. This was sort of the opposite of that at the very end. There's karma, and things go both ways over the course of time. If 2002 Duke got robbed of what many people thought would be a national title run because of this crazy Indiana game where the ball rolled away for us. Maybe 2019 Duke got a karmic break because the roll didn't go for Central Florida.
Oh, I was only going to go back a year and say that Grayson Allen's last shot at the end of the Kansas game last year was going to be it. But
I think Sam's got it there.
As a friend pointed out to me, that game was to go to the Final Four. This was a game to go to the Sweet 16. That Indiana game happened in the Sweet 16, right?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Yeah, slightly different circumstance, but certainly, perhaps Duke is still owed then for that. No, I'm not going to pretend like Duke is owed anything. We've won a couple of national championships since that Indiana game. I think we're doing okay on the karma front, but man, how heart stopping was that last play of the game? I mean, you think about the Butler championship game from a few years ago. That sort of had echoes of that same, especially. It wasn't that last Butler play, not where Hayward puts up the half-court shot, but the play before that where Hayward was driving to his right and Zubek had to get up in his grill and
full extension
and reach his hand out. Yeah, that was what that was reminding me of, was that last play. And then as time was expiring, I was screaming at the television just to get the ball and throw it away. Just throw it anywhere. Don't let the ball get back up again. Yeah, that was it was an exciting finish to the game. Although I
still don't know how that Aubrey Dawkins tip didn't go in. That thing literally rolls across every inch of the rim. We needed the gods of physics to change physics for that ball not to go in. But I'll take it.
Last year's ball literally touched every square inch of the inside and the top of that rim. And so, when it happened again and I saw it like roll across, I was like, oh, it didn't even get all the rim like last year's did.
All right, guys, I want to finish with one quick question on the UCF game. And I just want your very quick responses. Do you think that one UCF shot hit rim when it came down, or did it just get backboard? Jason?
So what I would say is this. It was so close. I don't know that the refs could have overturned it. I think it probably didn't get the rim, but it sure, I mean, there were several angles where it sure looked like it did. And I'll say this, I think maybe it didn't get the rim, and the blown fast break dunk that happened about a minute later, where Aubrey Dawkins sort of lost the handle as he was going up for a dunk that probably would have sealed the game. That to me was sort of a cosmic karma makeup for the shot clock violation that didn't happen.
All right, Donald?
I don't think it touched the rim at all. Because when they show the freeze frame and they're showing it frame by frame, you don't see the ball change trajectory until it hits the backboard.
Let the record reflect then that in the opinion of the unbiased Duke Basketball Report podcast, that ball did not touch the rim. This episode of the Duke Basketball Report podcast is brought to you by the boys of Bird Campbell, PA, with law offices in Florida and Texas. For all of your legal needs, contact Bird Campbell, PA at byrdcampbell.com. Have your legal needs taken care of by a couple of Duke alumni and former roommates. Bird Campbell means business. All right, guys. So I want to quickly do a little look at the rest of the field. It's about 10 p.m. on Sunday when we're recording this. There are a couple games left in the round of 32, but I just wanted to see if you guys had any reactions to the rest of the games from this weekend before we move on to the Virginia Tech game and the Sweet 16 next week. So, Jason, I'll start with you. Feel free to kind of go wherever. I know that a lot of this weekend has been fairly chalk, although some of the games have been particularly exciting. Maybe that Maryland LSU game. What stood out to you from this weekend?
I think what sticks out to me is how chalky it's been. I mean, we don't know the result of it yet. We're going to have 1, 12, or 13 that makes it to the Sweet 16 because UC Irvine and Oregon are playing right now, and one of those two teams, that's a 12 and a 13. But other than that, I'm not sure there's going to be anyone who makes it to the Sweet 16 where you're going to be like, wow, that's a shocker. I did not see that one coming. Almost without fail, every other one of these teams is a team that is among the elite. And that says to me, we're going to see really, really competitive Sweet 16 games that hopefully make up for the fact that it's been, not only has it been chalky, there hasn't been a lot of really great games. I mean, the Iowa-Tennessee game today goes to overtime. I think it's the first, I'm pretty sure it's the first overtime game of the tournament. But it was a game where Tennessee was blowing them out the whole time, and then Iowa came back late. And then even the overtime wasn't like super exciting because Tennessee raced out to a 7-point lead in the overtime very, very quickly. So to me, the story of the tournament so far is cream rising to the top, and the cream is the ones, the twos, the threes, and the fours. And for the most part, almost without fail, that's what we're getting in the Sweet 16. Donald, what do you got on the tournament so far?
I was gonna pop in before
go.
Donald
Sure,
goes.
sorry.
I think it sort of speaks to not that the tournament is here to validate what we think about the teams because the sample sizes are too small, but we sort of said going into the tournament, and we've said all year, the top of college basketball is really good. Like there's not Duke when Duke is at its best, it's really awesome. But we've known all year that Virginia, Gonzaga, UNC, Michigan State, Kentucky, these teams have been like a cut above the rest, and it's showing this weekend. Duke obviously had a hard time getting away from UCF, but for the most part, these 1s and 2 seeds, and then even for the most part, the 3s and 4s have had pretty strong showings this weekend. Donald, was that your take too? Were there any games in particular that you were locked in on?
I mean, going back to the part where we're talking about how chalky this bracket for the most part has been, as we speak, UVA is in the final seconds of winning. So all 4 1 seeds have gone through, all 4 2 seeds. And as of right now, we have all 4 3 seeds. Houston is up at the half. But all of these games are also kind of blah in the sense that there wasn't a lot of drama. If you think about all the games over the weekend, very few games had drama going down the last few seconds. I think, honestly, the most dramatic game that we've had was our game tonight.
There's no question about it.
Yeah, it's not even close. There's a lot of these games where there's a lot of drama.
Florida LSU was close. Florida LSU was because
Maryland,
and they
right?
actually
Maryland
LSU. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Maryland LSU. That's what I meant to say.
I forget about Jason. I forget about Maryland all the time.
Yeah, I do too.
They wear red. They're all wearing red.
But thanks to LSU for knocking Maryland out and not having to face them in DC this weekend and their fans. But anyway, I think the main part is, yes, sometimes we, like in most of these tournaments, we have a one shining moment that happens in this first weekend that make people go, oh my God, did you see that? And make people have FOMO that they didn't watch that game, or they were not in front of their computer or TV when a shot happens or a particular moment happens. I don't think we've really seen that in this tournament so far. And that is probably the most surprising part of this tournament to me, is not necessarily the chalk that sometimes happens, but just the fact that we haven't had moments that you can see, that you can sit there and at the water cooler tomorrow at work, you could say, oh my God, did you see that part of this one game? Or did you see the ending of this one game? Really, most people are going to be talking about this Duke UCF game that just happened as the main highlight of this tournament so far.
So I got an amazing stat for you guys. You ready for this? If you look at what we talk about Ken Pomeroy's rankings all the time, and a lot of people pay attention to them, and a lot of people believe that the Pomeroy rankings are a great way of figuring out who the best teams in the country are. At this moment, with 18 teams, I believe, a total of 18 teams still alive, because we've got 2 games that are still being played. 14, the top 14 teams in Ken Pomeroy's rankings, every single one of them from number 1 to number 14 is still alive. It looks like the Sweet 16 is going to feature the top 14 teams in the nation, plus LSU, who's number 18, and then, as I mentioned, either Oregon or UC Irvine, who are a bit lower. But I mean, it is amazing what we're seeing in terms of the top teams doing what they're supposed to do and winning their games. And I'm not sure we've ever seen a tournament that was, to some extent, this predictable.
Yeah, it's like I said, that sort of speaks to what the sport's been like this year, and as much as we might bemoan that the first weekend was not as exciting as it often is, hopefully it means that next weekend, Duke games or not, next weekend with all these great teams in the Sweet 16 should prove to be really entertaining for fans around the country. This episode of the Duke Basketball Report podcast is brought to you by GTHCGTH.com for all of your very cool, very swaggy Duke basketball apparel. Check out Duke alum Kenny Denard's site. They've got new shirts up, brand new shirts for the Sweet 16 with the Sights on 6 logo on it. So don't forget to check it out, GTHCGTH.com. So as we mentioned before, looking ahead at the Sweet 16, Duke is going to play a familiar opponent in the Virginia Tech Hokies on Friday in Washington, D.C. This is the game that Jason was very excited to talk about when we previewed the tournament a week ago, and now it is actually coming.
Pissed off, not excited. Pissed off.
Yeah, whatever. But now it's here. Now the Pigeons are coming home to roost. The Hokies are coming home to roost. Something along those lines. Anyway, of course, Duke already played Virginia Tech once this year in the regular season, a game that was in Blacksburg that Virginia Tech won. But let's be real, guys. The game next week is not going to look a whole lot like that game in Blacksburg. Both Duke and Virginia Tech were missing their best players. Duke, of course, was missing National Player of the Year, according to some, Zion Williamson. Virginia Tech missing Justin Robinson, who's been their most effective player this year, a deadly shooter and a facilitator, distributor, all those things for the Hokies and Buzz Williams. So, Donald, why don't you start us off here? Tell me about what you think this Virginia Tech game is going to look like, and what do you think Duke needs to improve on from the first weekend to the second weekend to get past a really, really strong Hokie squad?
Well, I think we've seen a lot of what Virginia Tech can do. And yes, they didn't have Justin Robinson last time, but we didn't have Zion Williamson last time. So I think this is going to be a different kind of game than we would have seen had both of those guys been healthy 3 weeks ago. I think in the end, when we get out of sorts, we start settling for jump shots. And that's not necessarily just 3-pointers. That's also, those 18 to 20-foot jump shots that are inside that 3-point arc. And we're not very good at those. That's not very efficient basketball. And when we get inside the paint, which I think we can do against Virginia Tech, then we're a much better basketball team. Also, Blackshear had a career game against us, and he's been pretty good since then. But you have to kind of wonder whether or not he will be able to produce that same kind of magic that he did in Blacksburg back on February 27th. So I'm not quite sure what the key to the game is, because I think there's a lot of them. But in the end, I think if Duke plays with the mindset that they are the best team in basketball, and that they can do anything they want inside the paint and go to the guys, go to the bread and butter plays and the bread and butter, basketball that has gotten us this far, then they're going to win this basketball game. But if we resort to just shooting a lot of threes, getting the ball to people who are in bad positions to make bad plays, and really not taking care of the basketball, which I don't think we did well against Virginia Tech last time, then we're going to be in trouble. And here's the thing. We're basically, again, going to be playing on the road. DC has a metric buttload of Virginia Tech fans who are itching to watch their team play and beat us again. We're going to have that mindset of this being a road game. There will be a lot of Duke fans there too, don't get me wrong, but we're going to have that mindset of approaching this like a business trip and really getting to the basics that have made Duke basketball as successful as it is this season.
I think that on top of that, you've got Virginia Tech is generally a very good 3-point shooting team. We talked about that the first time we played them. And Duke tonight against UCF, Duke really let UCF kind of run wild with the 3-point shots. That was what was on top of all the Taco Fall stuff, the 3-point shot for UCF was what was really working for them. So you got to hope that Duke is going to come up with a game plan to limit and push Virginia Tech off of the 3-point line better than they did tonight against the Golden Knights. I think that is my key, is to watch Duke's perimeter defense and see how much they're able to speed up Virginia Tech, because if Duke's in transition, that's when they're deadliest. Jason, was there anything perhaps on the Justin Robinson front that you're going to be keeping your eye on in this one?
Well, Justin Robinson is such a great facilitator. I mean, the thing he does really, really well for them is he sets up the other guys. He has, if you look at advanced stats, assist rate is a big advanced stat for guards. Justin Robinson's assist rate is through the roof, is incredibly high, and that's just, that's what he does for them in addition to other things. But especially now that he's come back, I still feel like he's trying to get his legs under himself a little bit. But he is fabulous at, even if it isn't himself creating the assist, like the hockey assist kind of thing, Justin Robinson makes the smart play. He makes the smart pass. But Sam, you were 100% right. The key for Virginia Tech is 3-pointers. This is one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country. They, as a result of that, they're one of the best effective field goal percentage teams in the country, because they hit a lot of threes. They don't even bother to take a lot of twos. They only take 2-point shots if they're wide open, or if Kerry Blackshear, who is an excellent interior player, if Kerry Blackshear, gets the ball in the post, they'll take a 2-point shot. But other than that, they're mostly taking 3-pointers, and that's their game plan. And they are incredibly patient about it. Sort of just like Virginia, this is a team that doesn't mind winding the shot clock way down. They play at a very slow tempo. One of the slowest tempos in the entire game, one of the 20 slowest teams in all of college basketball, because they are going to work the ball around until they get that open 3-pointer that they want. Now, Duke has been great up until now at stopping teams from getting good 3-point shots. One of the hallmarks of our defense is that we don't give up 3-pointers. We're one of the best 3-point field goal percentage defense teams in the country. But we saw today, there's no question that Central Florida was incredibly successful against Duke taking 3-pointers. A lot of them were contested. A lot of them were Aubrey Dawkins, just feeling it. And the dude was 5 of 7 from 3. But we can't afford to have something like that happen against Virginia Tech, because Virginia Tech is too good a team. And then, to me, obviously Zion Williamson is, a huge factor that they haven't had to deal with in the past. But I really want to see if we can figure out a way to hurt them on the boards. They're not a big team other than Blackshear. There's really no one else in their lineup taller than 6'6". So we're going to have a height advantage, perhaps even a very significant one, almost all the time. They're a team that they try to rebound together. They don't get very many offensive boards at all. But if we can hurt them on their defensive boards, our offensive boards, I think that would be a very, very big key. And I'm going to be interested in seeing how they defend Zion. I imagine they'll use Blackshear to do it, but Zion's venturing away from the basket a lot more these days, and he's starting with the ball on the perimeter, even if it's not just taking those 3-pointers. It's the fact that he starts on the perimeter, and because he wants to get a running start on you. Well, if he's drawing Blackshear away from the basket, that's a problem for Virginia Tech. And it's just, I think it's going to be a very, very interesting game. You may see, I actually think it's very possible that Ty Outlaw will spend a lot of time guarding Zion Williamson, but they've never seen him before. And I think that's a distinct advantage for Duke in this game. Although I'm still pissed that we have to play a team that knows us as well as Virginia Tech does. But the NCAA, I've done that rant. I'm not going to do it again.
Yes. We know. No need to repeat it here. I am the only other thing that I'm looking for on top of this is the DBR bracket challenge, which, as long as Duke is still in the tournament, is always going to be a tough fight. So it is a crowded top of the field right now. Of course, the winner of that event gets to appear as a guest on this show sometime over the summer. So keep your eyes out.
How many people did we get in the challenge?
It's a good question.
It says, the group says that there are 758 members of the of the bracket pool, but I don't know.
Wow,
I don't know how.
that's a lot.
No. But I think, but that there's a lot of inactive members in there. So I'm going back through. Actually, it looks like there's over 700 people. Over 700 people filled out the bracket this year. So
that's
amazing because I want to say last year it was only 218 last year.
Am I in 700th? I'm probably in 700th.
Is that for real?
Place.
No.
Yeah, there was only 218 people last year in the bracket.
I'm seeing a bunch. I'm seeing that much when I open up the Yahoo page. Now maybe they're repeats or something. I'm not sure. But yeah, there's a lot of people in there. So it's a tough fight. Don't worry, none of us are going to win.
Go ahead.
I was saying that the funny thing for me is when I was picking some of these, I had a couple reaches, and Kansas being one of them to make the Final Four. But the reason why I have these things,
so you're toast.
Yeah, but here's the thing: the reason why is in a bracket challenge like that, where there's 700 people and maybe 687 of them are picking Duke to win it all, you have to separate yourself in other places. And the only way you can do that is by picking Final Fours that other people don't have. So yeah, like some of these games where I wasn't really too upset that they occurred, that the losses occurred, but it's definitely just like, what do I have to do to kind of separate yourself from the pack? And I think that is what we're going to see over the next week, is whether some of these people who have some random Final Four teams, whether those picks remain intact.
All right, so guys, we're going to finish up here as we do normally on Sunday nights or whenever these weeks start for us. We're going to do our regular Player of the Week picks, and then for the parting shot, I think we have a collective one parting shot that we're going to do all together. But let's start with Player of the Week. Jason, I'll go to you first. Who was your Player of the Week for Duke's opening round games against North Dakota State and University of Central Florida?
There were a lot of guys who played really well, but I mean, come on. Zion Williamson. I mean, he was unreal. It's obvious to say we don't win without him. By the way, I feel like he's not only has he elevated his game since he came back from the injury, but I feel like it clearly looks to me like he was working when he was injured on his outside shot and his free throws and things like that. Because I think his form looks even better, and he's clearly not afraid to take 3-pointers. I mean, Zion took 7 threes in this game, and almost every single one of them looked like it was dead solid on target. Dude, he's clearly Player of the Week. He's Player of the Year, Player of the Decade.
All right, so Donald.
I'm going to go with the guy who I thought played well for both games. His name is Zion. That's definitely Zion.
Oh, okay. You weren't going to go with Joey Baker and his 3-pointer that he made, or Jordan Goldwire and the 3-pointers that he made. I mean, a lot of guys contributed. Guys, Zion Williamson was the Player of the Week. I don't know how many times we have to keep doing this. Maybe this will be a more fun thing for us to do next year when Zion's not around and we can actually spread the love a little more, right? 3 for 3.
Oh, I don't know. I kind of love watching Zion.
Oh yeah, we'll miss him, but at least this segment of the show, for the purposes of our content, will be a little bit more interesting. We'll finish with
can I take this moment and say I'm praying to the gods that the Atlanta Hawks get lucky in the lottery? If Zion Williamson, whichever NBA team gets Zion Williamson, it's going to change the future of that team. I mean, it's just. The Hawks have a shot at it. Please.
Yeah, would be pretty cool for you. Donald probably wouldn't mind it if he ended up on the Wizards. Wouldn't be the worst thing. Let's finish. I think, Donald, you're going to introduce this for us. We have a sort of collective parting shot this week because this was too good, right?
It definitely was. I think most people have seen at this point what Duke Blue Planet, now the Duke men's basketball Twitter and Facebook, their social media is just absolutely amazing. But I think they outdid themselves, because just before the tournament started on Friday morning, they released a video called The Brotherhood. It's a 4.5-minute video with basically everyone from Christian Laettner to Tyus Jones, all the way to, they had everybody. Marvin Bagley, Wendell Carter, anybody who we have known as to be one of the great stars of this Duke team since Coach K took over was a part of this video, talking about basically hyping you up for the tournament, but also explaining what the brotherhood means to them and what it is that these guys are fighting for. It's one of the best videos that Duke has ever produced for Duke basketball. And I just want to give a shout out to their social media team, because they have done absolute amazing work. And from what I heard, my best friend Jeff told me that he had read somewhere that this had been something that they had collected over the last 3 years. It was an idea that Dave Bradley came up with in 2015 after they won the national championship, and just had been collecting it from random people over the years. They even had Johnny Dawkins on here, which was kind of funny, considering that, they were doing this at a time that we could have played them.
Hey. So Donald, so what they did was, every time a player would come in town, like for the K Academy or for a regular game or any event that brought alumni back to town, they would have them sit down. They tried to have them sort of wear black or something like that. They had a specific background, and they ended up getting 58 different Duke basketball players. I mean, that's amazing. It's such a great video. It really and such a labor of love for the Duke men's basketball creative team to spend that much time on it. There had to be times they were tempted to, like, oh, we've got enough. Like last year, they're probably like, we've got 45 guys. We should do it now. Whatever the number may have been.
Mm-hmm.
But to wait until they got to what they thought was the perfect moment, and they nailed it. They absolutely nailed it.
And just the and before I end this, like, just to see how how they match the highlights from this year's team, and that part itself is flawless. Like, that takes a lot of work, and it's not just about getting the guys and recording the videos and just kind of splicing it together, but looping in those highlights and finding enough highlights from this season to make it so that it seems seamless and that it seems like they put this together last week is nothing short of amazing. And I'll tell you one thing, with a lot of the guys that you see, it brings back memories of all those guys playing basketball for Coach K and for Duke University. And just, that's what got me the most hype, is like, when you see Shane Batty on they would show a play from him blocking Jason Gardner in the national championship game in 2001. They show John Shire, and they show him in 2010. They show, Nolan Smith, and they show him in 2010. So, like, you get to remember these guys. And also, for a lot of these guys that are still in the NBA right now currently, it makes you appreciate them more, because when you're watching the NBA, I find now more than ever, I'm watching games and watching and rooting for their success, even if they're teams that I don't like. The guys I will always love and cherish. And I think that is what the brotherhood is really, that branding has really helped accentuate that amongst Duke's fans the last few years. And I think that is why this video is so brilliant.
Yeah, and I was just impressed at the sheer number of guys they had and how long the whole production is. Because like a minute and a half in, I thought, man, where's this? It's got to be like wrapping up soon. Like it sort of feels like a movie preview, right? Like a long 2-minute movie preview, and it's like 5 minutes long, and it still gives you chills like the whole way through. I was shocked at like how riveted I mean, obviously I'm a Duke fan, but I had a great time watching it. I hope that folks out there get a chance to, sit down for a couple minutes and watch a 5-minute video. Jason, did you have anything more on this very cool parting shot this week?
I do. I just love Christian Laettner's role in the video. I mean, when Laettner comes on, this is a guy who's still like embracing the fact that he's the worldwide villain. He doesn't mind it. And he says, look, he's like, hate me as much as you want, hate us as much as you want. This is what we do. We win. And you can just tell. And
that's the hashtag for the whole video. It's like, you ain't got to like us, but you will, respect us.
Yes. Yeah.
That sort of thing is just perfect, because that's exactly what it is, right? We've talked about it all season, we even talk about tonight, when we have our slanted view of what the game is going like. You go on Twitter and you see everybody else hating. They're hating because deep down they respect that we're in this position year after year after year with those guys.
Jason, I'm so glad you mentioned it. I was in Chapel Hill last night with a bunch of friends, and I walked by a dude in an I Still Hate Laettner t-shirt in 2019.
He
Were
hasn't
you old
been
enough
at
to
Duke in
remember why?
17 years. There are
27
years.
27 years. Oh my God. There are people who have children in school today who don't remember watching Christian Leitner play.
Yeah, like way long ago. Like
Yeah.
he's way before kids who are in college now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. And I would have said something to the guy, except as I mentioned, I was in Chapel Hill and I wasn't exactly trying to, to like get myself in too much trouble. So good thing that I'm still here today to talk about it. I did, before we want to wrap, guys, real quick, the game on Friday night, it looks like the tip times just came out. So Duke is in the second game on Friday night. The first game, of course, is LSU and Michigan State. If Duke beats Virginia Tech, they would get the winner of that game. That game tips just after 7:00 on CBS on Friday night. So Duke will be somewhere in the like 9:45-ish game.
Yeah.
They'll be in the really late game.
Yeah.
But that's got to be expected, right? We are prime time. So
that's not surprising. They want maximum eyeballs on the Blue Devils. And on Zion.
I can get on the road late from Durham to get there. So yeah, if folks are going to be in DC next weekend, Donald and I will be around. So I don't know, we'll like drink beers or something.
For sure.
We're good at that, right?
We'll have a little mini meetup, and when we figure out a place, we'll tell people on Twitter where we are having a few pre-game beverages, and people can stop by and say hello.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. It was fun, at least when it was here.
This weekend, I have a couch.
Yeah, Jason, if you want to come.
It's not going to happen, gentlemen. Sorry.
No, all right.
We tried.
Tickets and on short notice. No, okay, that's fine. Well, in any event, we will talk to you guys after the Virginia Tech game. Obviously, it'll be soon after if things go well, and perhaps not so soon after if things don't, as has sort of been the tradition here the last few years. So hopefully we talk to you sooner than later with good news from the Sweet 16. But that'll do it for this episode 155 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. For Jason Evans in Atlanta and for Donald Wine in Washington, D.C., the home of the Blue Devils for the Sweet 16, I am Sam Klein in Durham. Thank you very much for tuning in, as always. And thank you to our sponsors, GTHC, GTH.com, as well as Bird Campbell, PA, who has been with us for a while now. Duke Band, take us home.